12, 11.
And
Hold on, was that my cue?
yes, that's your cue.
ACMS Gaming.
So welcome to our show where we talk all things gaming. Today we are going to be talking about consoles, specifically one company's consoles. We're going to do a series on these and kind of pick apart what we liked and what we didn't like from each company. We thought it only fitting today to start with Nintendo.
So, are we going to be doing these like one console per episode, or like all of them in one single episode?
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it plays out. We're
Well-
gonna try to keep this to about an hour if possible.
So, let's start with the Nintendo Entertainment System.
Yeah. So back in 1988-89, they released the Nintendo Entertainment System. The box itself came with the console. It came out with 2 controllers and the famous Nintendo gun for the game Duck Hunt. It also came with 2 games, Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. Yeah, it was Duck Hunt, not Legend of Zelda like you would think as you youngins,
You would think.
but it was Duck Hunt and Super Mario Brothers.
Now, fun fact, but this is technically the first version and first ever combination game in gaming history.
Yeah, prior to that there was the Atari, and they were all solo games. They were really small programs.
And they were quite literally 8-bit down to the dots. But Nintendo did something interesting and with all the sprites of the characters. I'll get into that once we actually get into the talk of how the games were played and stuff.
16-bit,
Not exactly,
8-bit.
Yeah, 8-bit.
but it takes 8-bit to the next level. I'll get into that later.
So at any rate, when they came out, they had just those 2 games, and it soon swept the world by storm, and it became one of the most, well, it was at the time the most popular gaming console in the world. Also, it was sort of the only gaming console. There were computers out there that were doing gaming and stuff like Commodore 64 and all those types of things, but the main hookup to your TV type console was Nintendo Entertainment System. And they did so many things right. They had games like Mario, Legend of Zelda, Duck Hunt. That was so much fun. They had games like Double Dragon. All these really innovative games where they did some absolutely amazing things at the time that could only be done on arcades, which, if you don't know what an arcade is, you're very young. And I will explain. They were buildings, kind of like storefronts, and they were filled with video game arcades. They were standing consoles.
Like Donkey Kong.
Put a quarter in and you get to play for, until you lost all of your lives.
Fun
Donkey
fact.
Kong was an arcade game.
Fun fact.
Was.
Donkey Kong was actually one of the first ported video games in history. At least I think. I'll check my facts later on, but
Donkey Kong was originally on Atari and got used on the Nintendo Entertainment System as well.
yeah, so it technically is the first ever ported video game.
But with the Nintendo Entertainment System, they had so many great games. Contra was one that I played the heck out of. Mike Tyson Punch-Out! Oh my gosh.
Which, fun fact, they actually created a special chip just for Punch-Out to allow the characters to be more expressive.
And they also innovated a lot of things. Nintendo has always been known for innovation. They've changed and done so many different things from everybody else. I think that's what I really like about Nintendo, is that they're constantly shifting gears and doing just such innovative things with their consoles.
Fun fact, Nintendo is actually known for changing up of what their console is about with every single release.
Yeah, and the Nintendo Entertainment System was the first in the series. They had the standard, those gray cartridges, and they all came with a book that told you how to play the game.
Which also included lore about the game as well.
Yeah, many times it included lore of the game. It told you everything you needed to know to play the game. There was no tutorial modes. There was no. Well, later on they gave out. Well, they didn't give, but they sold a strategy guide on how to beat particular areas of particular games.
They sometimes include special development details in some of these pages, but I think we only really own one strategy guide, and that's for Super Mario Galaxy 2.
I owned a bunch of them back in the day because it was the hot thing, and then they had their magazine, the Nintendo Power.
I think the Nintendo Power actually sometimes include comic panels for specific series.
Yeah, and it also had news and notes and secrets and all kinds of stuff.
Kind of like Easter eggs.
Nintendo ended up doing incredibly well. They came out with some of the most creative things I've ever seen, like the Power Pad, Power Glove. Which wasn't a real big seller, but it was innovative for the time that it was in. I feel like at the time that was them being way ahead of the time.
Yeah. Now moving on to our next console.
Well, actually, there's still a few more things with the Nintendo Entertainment System that we have to talk about. It's also one of the very few systems that actually comes with a pre-programmed reset button. Now, this button was specifically used in case the game froze.
Right. And I hit that button very often when I died in a game, and I rage quit.
Now, back in this time, which I actually do notice from personal experience, since I have played the Nintendo Entertainment System before, or which we'll call the NES, as for short sake, and just so we don't get a tongue twister later on.
Yeah, because that's what everybody called it anyways.
The NES, this is the only system in Nintendo's Lifeline that doesn't come with saves for games.
Well, the saving was actually done on the cartridges. They had a specified amount of space that on that cartridge when you saved your game, it saved to the cartridge.
Yeah, but this saving system didn't come until Legend of Zelda, I believe. So before for the Legend of Zelda, all the games worked like arcades. You only had a specified number of lives, or not at all, and you had to play the game all the way to the end in one gaming session.
And you are correct. In many instances, that was the case. Prior to Zelda, I don't recall any games that had saves. Zelda was really a big, innovative jump in video gaming as far as home consoles.
In fact, its cartridge is the only of its kind to where it actually supports the idea of saved games, which later stuck around for later Nintendo games, but they kept jumping around with that.
Yeah, and it had a gold cartridge, which was absolutely beautiful, which I still have, along with my original NES.
Now, the product value of that will probably still cost a lot, but not as much as it would if it were in an unopened package.
Correct. The system itself had that little flip, what do you call it, compartment?
It was
with the
supposed...
cartridge in.
Now, fun fact. The Nintendo Entertainment System is actually a different version of Nintendo's first console, called the Super Famicom, on this system. Well, I guess not this, but the Super Famicom in general. Well, this console actually, he had smaller cartridges, but that's because it was a cartridge, it's slot-in system. Like the Sega Entertainment System, well,
Which
Sega
we'll talk
Genesis,
about on
but
another podcast.
yeah, we'll talk about that one later. But it's a slot-in game system. But for the U.S., Nintendo actually decided to take a note out of the cassette tape systems. It's where you could put in a cassette tape and it would play something on the screen.
Well, you had to slide it in and push it down.
Yeah.
And in many cases, you would push it down and the game wouldn't start up. You get this blinking screen. And then anybody that has ever had a Nintendo Entertainment System knows exactly what to do in this situation.
Blow into it.
You pull out the cartridge and blow into it.
Now, funny enough, this is actually quite a casual fact that even happens during today's times with consoles. If something doesn't work, you blow right into it.
Not so much into the consoles these days. These days, it's more or less a disc. So you clean the disc off and put it back in. But with those cartridges, there was that slot and just one little board that had all the microchips on it. And you'd blow into that, slide it back in, push it down, and hit power again. See if it worked.
The reason why it works most of the time is because the air coming out of your mouth has some saliva in it and then gets onto the board, which allows the connection to be more connected.
Well, to actually give the proper fact, it's because your breath is moving around dirt that got in the cartridge.
Yeah, we were under the impression that it was all about dust. While there is truth to the fact that the moisture from, the air that you're breathing out also helps to make the connection with the electronics within. We were always under the impression that it had to do with the fact that the little slot cartridge had gotten dust in it, so we'd blow on it, put it back in, hit power, and see if it worked. And then rinse and repeat until it did.
Now, to actually get into some of the games, so let's start with the first one, Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt. Now, these two games are very special in their own kind.
Iconic.
Duck Hunt and Super Mario Bros. Were actually advertised with a special ad that actually kind of had the first ever 3D model showcasing it. And all it did was announce itself. We are Nintendo. Ultimate Game System. You cannot beat us.
And we took great pride in trying to refute that. I know back in the day, Super Mario Brothers was the bomb. It was the game, and everybody wanted to beat it. Everybody tried to beat it, and you just kept finding new secrets along the way because there were those hidden blocks. There was a negative world.
Although, fun fact, the negative world actually showcases lost data that how it's supposed to show how Super Mario Bros. Was supposed to be a lot bigger than it actually was. This is technically World 98.
Yeah, we couldn't get out of it.
That's because
It was like never-ending water world.
Well, that's because the rest of the world could not load. That pipe was supposed to lead somewhere else, but due to a bug in the code, it leads right back to the start. Now, there actually is a way to progress further into these, but you have to manually add in a flagpole to end the level.
Which requires you to either download it onto your computer using a type of emulation dumper, and then you can emulate it on your computer to add the flagpole, or you could just get a game.
Well, we'll get into Game Sharks later, because that's actually going to be our next topic after I tell a little bit about how the sprites were created.
Oh, I'm not done with this game yet, because there was so much to it, and then we got to talk about Duck Hunt.
Yeah, and Duck Hunt is actually technically the first shooter game.
Yeah, Yes.
But we'll get into that after Super Mario Brothers.
So Super Mario Brothers had its original, worlds, and you had to go through all the worlds and beat Bowser. I think everybody knows the story. Bowser
like 9
stole
levels.
the princess, and you have to go through all of the castles, and at each one you find Toad, who was not a playable character. He just sat in the castle and told you, "I'm sorry, the princess is in another castle."
And of course, we could probably imagine how annoyed Mario would get after the first few levels. Because he's just like, "Oh, come on, where is the princess? Can't you just tell me what she is?"
You would think.
And so it'd just be like, "I'm sorry, but I don't even know where she is."
But an absolutely iconic puzzle game. You had everything in that game at the time. Now you look back with all the video game consoles that have come out and all of the increased capacity and increased graphics and everything. People that start now and look back at that are going to be like, "What is this?"
I love it. Unless you play for it.
Because it's all side scrolling.
Now, fun fact, but nobody really knows why the screen stops scrolling. It just does. But there's actually a video on YouTube that technically gives a little prank. Saying that it's actually one of the creatures from Yoshi's Story that is stopping Mario from progressing past. And it's the whole screen.
Actually, if you make it far enough, you can actually go past the flagpole and just move forever.
Oh yeah.
To jump over the flagpole.
Oh yeah. This actually requires a little bit of a bug in the game, but you see, the top and bottom of the screen are technically linked. Technically. There's actually a death barrier that's coded on the bottom part of the screen that kills whatever's down there. However, if you jump on a Koopa from the top of the screen, which here's how Mario's jump is coded. Mario's jump actually always stomps if you're moving downward. Doesn't matter where on the enemy you are. If your hitboxes overlap and Mario's moving downwards, the enemy will always die, even if he's above him. Which, this is how you can actually get past the flagpole. Wait for a green Koopa Troopa to fall down onto where he would have died, jump to the very top of the screen, and if you time it perfectly, Mario will hit the Koopa from the top of the screen. In which, now you have to wait for the Koopa to get off of out of his stunned state, and just wait for him to walk to the right all the way to the flagpole, to which you jump from the very top of the stairs. You hit the Koopa, and you officially make it over the flagpole.
And then you just keep moving forever.
Which, fun fact, you can actually find out that there's actually a hidden brick block on the castle, because they couldn't exactly program Mario to enter the castle. So, once he hits the flagpole, there's special code that has him auto run to the right until he hits a block. Then he enters the back of every single sprite layer, so that way it gives the imitation of him entering the castle.
Well, things were much simpler then, and computers were not nearly as complex.
But it is really hard to play.
Now, Duck Hunt. Oh my gosh. I have flashbacks of Duck Hunt. Because, there were times where you absolutely knew that you shot that duck, and it looked like you didn't even come close. And it was so infuriating.
Now, funny enough, off of how this game works, it's technically the first ever game to include camera tracking.
Yeah, because it was supposed to track where the gun was aiming when you fired.
I think the camera was actually inside of the gun, and it just has scanned the screen to see if you were highlighting a duck.
And then, if you did miss enough of them, that stupid dog
Would come up and
yeah, that sound lives in my mind rent free.
seriously, you need to
It's
evict that
still
laugh at some point.
infuriating. I mean, every single time.
Hey, you wanna play some Duck Hunt?
No.
Okay, but to give some actual insight, Duck Hunt is technically the only game ever to exist where you actually need the proper setup to even play the game. If you try to do it on a flat screen TV, your aim will be off no matter how accurate you are.
Because the game was designed around tube TVs.
Yeah, it was designed around the tube TVs, the huge box TVs that had the square look. You literally could not play Duck Hunt unless you had that TV.
You could play it, but it would be unbelievably difficult. You would have to adjust everything about it. So then we move on to Legend of Zelda. My personal favorite game of all time. The original Legend of Zelda, gold cartridge. You know, and it was really the first open world game. You could go anywhere you wanted to. You'd probably die if you went to the wrong area too quickly.
Now, funny fact, but the only way to really beat Ganon, you don't even really need the Triforce. You just have to have the proper knowledge of where he's located inside of the dark.
And you need the silver arrow.
Yeah, the only requirements to kill Ganon are silver arrow and at least 1 rupee. Because at the time, your rupees were your ammo.
Correct. Yeah, every time you fired an arrow, it took 1 rupee.
Which means that technically makes you ask the question, does Link have enough magic to be able to transform rupees into arrows?
Apparently. But again, with Zelda, you had the whole idea of castles that you had to. Well, they were called dungeons, but it's the same concept as Mario. You have those 8 stages that you had to get through, and you collected things along the way.
And of course, Cool Dan decides to grab that golden cartridge.
Yeah, there's my golden cartridge.
Explain the look on the cartridge.
So it's a gold cartridge, and then the sticker on top of it had the shield with a heart. The heart containers. That's the fairy.
Let me see.
At any rate.
Wow, this thing is actually kind of heavy.
Yeah, it was an incredibly innovative game as well because of the open world nature of it. You could save and you had to collect things like heart containers to get extra parts. You had to collect new weaponry, potions, all kinds of stuff.
Looks like the
that via either the stores or finding them out there.
Looks like the bottom of the cartridge is slightly damaged, but that's just what happens over time when you constantly play it.
Yes. And the story, I think everybody that's ever played a Nintendo console knows. Princess Zelda is essentially kidnapped by Ganon, or in this day and age, Ganondorf usually.
Well, to give a proper insight, hey, Ganon is actually one of the many big sprite characters that probably required multiple different and 4x4, well, I guess 2x2 sprite sets to create his sprite.
Oh, so it also explains on the back on how to save. You must hold in the reset button on the control deck while turning off the power. Failure to do so may result in the loss of your stored game information.
Yeah. And it was fine and dandy back then for that because we were just happy to be able to save a game. It was hard to find enough time, even as a kid, to play out an entire game in a single day. A lot of times you'd have to leave the console on and go take your breaks and come back and continue playing and hope that nobody would come in like parents and turn the game off.
Now, there's actually a common misconception about standing too close to the TV. Okay, now, they usually say that it could hurt your eyes, but in reality, what actually hurts your eyes is not blinking.
Well, and at the time, the controllers were connected to wires, which connected to the console, and the wires were only so long. So you had to be fairly close to the TV to play it. We didn't have wireless controllers back then. That came later.
Now,
which
even
Nintendo actually did create.
They did end up creating wireless controllers at some point, but a lot of wireless controllers back then required you actually have to face the controller or to the sensor.
Which plugged into where the controllers would have normally been. I had that when it came out.
It was very inaccurate back then.
Yeah, I mean, it was like infrared.
And funny fact, but Nintendo actually used infrared all the way up until the Wii U era. Their Wiimotes were all just infrared sensors. In fact, here's actually a cool life hack, but you could actually get a lesser variant of the Wiimote sensors by just placing 2 lit candles next to your TV. They just had to be fairly close together, and you would have a slightly downgraded Wii sensor bar.
That's interesting. And the controllers for the Nintendo Entertainment System, you only had the directional control pad, and you had a B button, an A button, a start, and a select. That was it. They weren't like these really high-end controllers like you see now with 2 control sticks, control pad, or directional pad, 4 buttons on the facing, 4 buttons on the back, and in some cases, buttons underneath the handles. It wasn't like that. They were just a rectangular controller. That is what we had to play.
Yeah, and I guess this is also another fun fact, but these rectangular controllers were actually technically designed after the motherboard that is actually inside of them.
Yeah, it was basically just a casing for the motherboard. So with Zelda, you go through your 8 dungeons, each one having its own boss, each one having secret rooms, which was another innovation that we did not have prior to that. There were secret rooms that you could only get to by blowing up a wall, and they were darked out, like they weren't even part of the map within the dungeon, which, by the way, you had to find, along with a compass that would show you where the Triforce was, which meant the room before that is where you would find the boss.
Now, to get a clarification, it's not the actual Triforce, it's a piece of the Triforce of Wisdom.
Correct.
Which, how about you tell them a little bit of the lore about why the Triforce of Wisdom was split into different pieces?
Let's see, if memory serves, Ganon wanted all of the Triforce, and they split it into pieces so that it was more difficult for Link to regain the entire thing.
Now, if memory serves me correct, there was only 2 pieces of the Triforce in the first game, weren't there?
No, there was a piece of the Triforce in every dungeon.
No, 2 full Triforce pieces. There's Wisdom and Power.
No, there were 3. Hence the name Triforce.
Yeah, but why was there only 2 in the first game?
There weren't.
Triforce of Wisdom, Triforce of Power, Triforce of Courage didn't even make an appearance in the first Zelda game.
Well, the the icon that you see, the three triangles connected, that was the Triforce from day one.
I don't think you're understanding. I'm talking about in the first game, there are only two pieces of the full connected Triforce that appeared. The Triforce of Power, or which Ganon held, and the Triforce of Wisdom, which Link had to collect. Like, it's different pieces for.
Well, I think that was setting up for the next game, if I'm not mistaken. I could be totally wrong on that, but I think that they were leaving it open for if they made a sequel to the game. I mean, that's the only reason I can think of. That would be the only reason to leave something like that out, because, like, if you were planning this to be a one-off, you would have to have everything in that game.
Now, technically, all the games back then were one-offs. They didn't intend for them to be as successful as they were.
No, but they left openings to where they could create another one.
If it was popular enough.
Correct.
Which, of course, all of the games were. Now, allow me to get into regional differences. So, within the different regions, there's actually different difficulties that the games played at. Because different countries had different gaming levels.
At different standards.
Yeah. Which means that some things might have been removed or changed in the US release that weren't a part of the Japan release. Which a lot of I guess, there's religious differences actually appear. Like Link's different shields, which, yes, Link actually had two shields he could wield. One of which was just part of his regular sprite, which did absolutely nothing. It couldn't block anything. And then there's the big shield, which actually could block stuff, but it only had one weakness. It could be stolen by likes.
Correct. And that was so annoying, because you'd have to go back and buy a new large shield, and yeah, they were not cheap.
1,000.
Well,
the small shield could block some things, but it couldn't block all things. Like, it couldn't block the arrows or the shots from, what's the dude in the water?
I believe those are called Zora.
Yeah, Zora. But it could not block those. The large shield could.
Now, Link's sword is actually optional in some cases. There are speed runs where they could actually skip that sword and focus on getting heart pieces to get enough hearts to get the white sword.
But you would need a weapon to do that, because you had to go into the dungeon in which to collect the other items to get them.
Speedrunners had a way of breaking the game's ideology, so they technically didn't even need to grab the sword. They just needed to have a damaging item and some rupees, namely the bow. Because that can shoot arrows as long as you have rupees, which you can actually get rupees as an occasional drop from enemies, but there were a lot of areas where you could just find rupees.
Well, they also had to get a raft and a ladder. Well, it was called a ladder, but essentially it was used just to walk over smaller water areas, like riverway type looking things.
Now, the only reason it could actually float across a specific area is because that was actually a trigger to activate a constant moving raft, which speedrunners also use to break the game as well. But nowadays you could get speedruns under 45 minutes for this game.
Well, and at the time when the game came out, people weren't interested in speedruns. That wasn't a thing for us. What was a thing for us was collecting everything and beating the game.
Yeah, now, allow me to ask the interesting question. What counted as 100% in The Legend of Zelda?
Getting every item within the game and defeating every dungeon and defeating Ganon.
But what truly counted as 100%?
Well, 100% at the time was just considered that. But there were other secrets within the game, like burning out bushes and getting stuff from inside, like rupees or whatever surprise happened to be there. Collecting all the weapons, all the potions, everything that we could get in the game.
Quick question. This is off topic from games, but with the NES, if you look at the bottom, there's this little spot that's blocked off by a piece of plastic. What do you think that was used for?
Probably getting into the console. I never messed with it.
Well, for all we know, it could also be a battery port, or so who really knows?
Well, actually, I saw a video on this. Don't know if it's 100% true, but supposedly this was an expansion slot, like what was on the GameCube at the bottom, where you could add stuff like extra battery power, make it portable, and all.
Huh.
I wouldn't have known that. I never played with that thing. I just left it at home and played the games.
Now, how about we talk about the secret mode that came with The Legend of Zelda that nobody probably even knew it was there, or hero mode. Now, this mode unlocks after you beat the game.
Oh yeah, when you get the light blue outfit.
Well, no, that's actually a damage modifier, but I'm talking about the second adventure, second quest.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about too. After you beat the game, your sprite on the save file shows up as like this really light sky blue outfit. I wasn't talking about the blue ring. There was a blue ring and a red ring in the first run through.
Although, ironically, it turned Link's outfit white.
Right. But once you beat the game, you came back with a new sprite and everything changed. The dungeons changed.
I think the enemies were also one level higher than they were supposed to be.
Yeah, they were a lot harder than the first run through.
Such as red Octoroks would be blue Octoroks, and I think blue just stayed as blue, but it just had more health.
Well, and if you ran through the first game, the first run through, the red ring was the one that was the biggest damage modifier, and it would take less part from you when you got hit. And the blue was the same. It was like, half and then a quarter for the red ring.
Now, surprisingly, all enemies have their own damage modifiers.
Correct.
So, the red ones just do the basic damage. And blue ones actually do double that. So, with the blue ring, I think blue enemies would be dealing as much as a red enemy if you didn't have any rings. And if you got the red ring, I think they would all do a quarter heart. Except, that's not fully true. Lynels actually have their own special damage modifiers because they're literally the toughest enemies in the game.
Yes.
Outright.
Yes, they were. Which is why I said, if you were, because it was an open world, you could go to that area where the Lynels were, but chances are you'd die pretty quick.
And if you
didn't have the right gear.
Now, here's the interesting part. With The Legend of Zelda, if you die, you don't restart the game from the beginning. Instead, you just respawn back at the starting area.
Yeah, with all of the stuff that you had. That was part of the saving feature. And then you have innovation that they did with some of the puzzles within the game. It's like there's one area where you have to go up 8 times, and it looks like you're going to the same exact area.
Except that's actually an illusion.
Yeah, it's an illusion, and after you go up 8 times, then the dungeon appears the next time. And then there was one where you had to go, I think it was north, west, south, east. Because the area was in the shape of like a cross turned sideways, and you had to go in a specific order to get the dungeon to show up.
And after you actually complete these puzzles, they completely disable after you've done them.
Right.
But this was actually technically the first ever time where Nintendo actually created puzzles for their games.
It was fantastic. I mean, that game was magnificently done. Like I said, to this day, it's still my favorite game of all time.
Now, how about we talk about the fairies, because these were actually interesting.
Well, the fairies, at that point, they gave you 3 hearts back, unless you went to the fairy fountain.
Which, this is where you would find the big fairy.
Correct. And that would heal all of your damaged hearts.
However, these only worked once per reset.
Correct.
Or I guess once per respawn, I think.
Respawn. You could leave and then come back and get filled up again.
Oh yeah, wasn't there no such thing as updating your game?
Oh no, there wasn't. When they sold the game, that was the game.
You were basically always playing the 1.0 version, but some games actually did get re-releases with updates.
Yeah, later on, but for all intents and purposes with the NES, you got the cartridge, that was the full game. There was no downloadable content. There was no update. There was no bug fixing. None of that stuff existed back then. Because, quite honestly, there was no online.
Now, how in some cases, is nowadays, we have a video for just about everything. So, you can learn a lot, but you have to be careful on how you learn it.
Now, one of my other favorite games on the Nintendo Entertainment System was Double Dragon series.
Now, these were technically also the first beat-em-ups, but
Story of 2 brothers. One of their girlfriends gets kidnapped by a gang, and you're going through these different areas, defeating all the gangs within to get to the main boss, who, as it turned out, had a machine gun, and you did not.
yeah, that's the comedy of the video games. They have something and you do not, and it's just like you brought a knife to a gunfight.
Now, having said that, you could get the gun from him. Like, you could jump kick him, do like a flying side kick, and he would drop the gun and you could pick it up and start shooting.
Now, that's actually technically the trick to an easy kill. Which,
Yes.
by the way, every single boss actually has this mechanic.
And they did 3 Double Dragon games. I loved all 3 of them. I can't tell you how many hours of my life I spent on that game.
So, here's actually an example of every single boss has an easy kill mechanic. Bowser, or from Super Mario Brothers. His easy kill mechanic,
Jump over him.
yeah, you could jump over him, or even better, you could wait for him to jump and run under him.
Yeah, I mean, there were several ways to just quickly defeat Bowser.
But there's also an easier way, sprite manipulation. So the final level Bowser throws hammers. Yes, we all know that. But each hammer pattern is different. And there's just this one pattern where if you move fast enough, the sprites overload and a few of the hitboxes for the hammers disappears. I mean, you could jump right through his hammers like a ghost.
I did not know that.
This is how speedrunners beat Super Mario Brothers in just 4 minutes and 55 seconds. No, 45 seconds.
I never did that. Again, speedrunning was not our thing. It was just beating the game.
But every single boss has a quick kill mechanic. And sometimes we just do it the long way because we don't know this quick kill mechanic.
Now, a smaller known game that I absolutely love, Super Dodgeball.
I've actually played this game with you before and I sucked at it.
I love that game. I spent a lot of time on that one as well. You'd get a team of players, you picked your country, and each player had their own special throw. You would run, jump, and if you hit the button at the right time, it would do their special throw. And, some of them were, super fast balls. Some of them went up into the sky, hung out for a second, and then dropped right down on top of their head. And you could counter it. You could catch it and, not get hit. But it was a lot more difficult.
Now, funny enough, I think in Super Dodgeball, catching doesn't even get the player who threw it out, let alone jumping in over the line and throwing.
No, it doesn't. Those are later rules that came into actual dodgeball games just to make it either go faster or make it more interesting, or those are the things that came down the line. Another game I rather enjoyed that is lesser known was called River City Ransom.
I say this was another beat 'em up game.
It was, and it was along the same lines as Double Dragon. It was a gang thing. You went to all these different turfs, and each turf had a different gang that was in charge of it.
I think each turf also had their own special mechanics.
Yes, and they had their own levels, and they got stronger and stronger as you went.
But so did you.
Yeah, so did you. And you could go to all these different stores and get power-ups or new moves.
Or a frickin' gun.
I don't recall ever having a gun.
I think there might have been some points where you could actually end up using a weapon against others.
Oh yeah, you could use weapons. You could use whatever weapons they had on them. You could knock them out of their hand, pick it up, and use it.
Or you can use an oil cancer.
They had like brass knucks, and baseball bats, and all that stuff.
Although I think every game had that one weapon that was just extremely overpowered for absolutely no reason.
Yeah.
I'd say with that one, if there was a whip, it was probably one of the best weapons because of the ranged attack.
It was a really good weapon for that game. Then again, in Double Dragon, there was a whip as well. But the overpowered weapon there was actually the silver baseball bat.
How about you actually explain how all these weapons work with these beat 'em ups?
So you just pick them up from either laying on the ground or take them from after knocking down one of the bad guys, and you'd be able to start using it. Depending on what the weapon was, would determine how you got to use it. Like knives, you'd throw the knife, and it'd go flying and hit them, and it'd kill them. With the baseball bat, you could just keep swinging and hit everyone around you at any point.
But what
around
makes
you? I mean, in front of you and behind you, because that was all we had.
now? How about you actually explain what the difference between the baseball bat and the silver baseball bat?
So the baseball bat is what you would take off of the enemies. The silver baseball bat, or it was a spiked silver baseball bat. There was only one way to get it, and it was a glitch in the game. There was a stage where you would be on top of a fence-looking thing. You climb up the fence, be on top of it, and then you'd be walking across. You'd take a baseball bat from one of the bad guys, and then you would come down the fence. Now, next to the fence, there was a construction site-looking thing with orange beams, and then if you were to swing the bat at an exact, precise time, it would turn into the spiked baseball bat, and you would hold on to that for the rest of the level, and you'd hit people with it, and it'd do unbelievable damage.
Which basically means it was technically the one-hit kill debug weapon.
Pretty much, yeah.
Now, could this weapon be kept between levels?
No. It would disappear as soon as you beat the final stage of that level.
Which means every stage is technically a different game.
Yeah, essentially it was. You'd get it just for that level until you beat whoever the big guy was in that particular level.
Now, could this weapon be found in other levels?
No. It was only there.
So, why was it only there?
I don't know. It was just a glitch. And it was one of those glitches that benefited the players.
Now, do you think the developers unintentionally left it in that one specific level and forgot to delete it there?
I don't know. I don't know if the devs did it intentionally or if they just something in the coding allowed it to happen prior to release. I'm not totally sure, to be honest, but it was there. We utilized it quite often. I did every chance I got.
Now, what about River City Ransom? Were there any best weapons in that game?
Yeah, the whip was probably the best one there. Because of the range, you could keep them further away and just repeatedly hit them. And then there was the fatal boost, which after they were on the ground, you jump up and stomp on them a couple of times and they die.
Now, that one is actually a bit of an unreliable weapon because it requires you to be precise on where you jump. Because
No, it really didn't. You just had to stand right next to the person as they were down and hit the button and you jump on them. It was reliable once you got it. I mean, it was a later game item, but because of the cost. But once you got it, it was reliable.
now, how about we actually get into a different type of game? Namely, the racing type games.
Oh, you mean like Mario Kart type stuff?
Kinda. I don't understand sign language. Oh my.
So yeah, there were racing games. There were sports games. There were all kinds of games. The racing games I wasn't really big into. I'll be honest. The sports games were the thing for me at the time. Aside from Mario and Zelda, and, the fighter games, Ninja Gaiden.
Oh yeah.
That was an amazing game on the Nintendo.
Fun fact, but Ninja Gaiden is technically one of the first ever games where damage is permanent.
Correct.
It doesn't matter which level you were in, and if you took damage, that was permanent. That was left on you until you could find a healing item.
And it was awesome. It was a great game.
I guess it was technically the first ever hardcore game.
To a certain extent, yeah. They just did so many great games on the Nintendo Entertainment System. We could probably spend the next,
2 hours.
2, 3, 4. Well, I could probably talk about it all day long. But, starting to run short on time, I want to get through, at least some of the other fun sports games that were out there, like Double Dribble, which was the NBA Pro Basketball essential game.
I think there was also golf.
There was golf. There was Kings of the Beach, which was sand volleyball. That was incredibly fun. They did Paperboy.
Paperboy?
Yeah. Jordan versus Bird was another big basketball game. And that had an innovative feature where they had the slam dunk contest.
Wasn't there also that one game with the sandwiches?
Burger Time?
I think that's what it was called.
That was actually originally, I think, on Atari.
Huh.
But yeah, they did have Burger Time. They had all 3 of the Mario games, 2 Zelda games. Castlevania was on it.
I think that was actually the first of 2 games that create a combined genre.
Yeah, and I can't say it enough. Nintendo did so many things right with that gaming console that it's no wonder that they are, as far as I'm concerned, the granddaddy of them all. Atari was first, but Nintendo did it best.
Well, next week we'll be getting into Metroidvanias.
Are we gonna talk about the next console?
SNES.
Well, yeah, but we'll spend 30 minutes talking about Metroidvanias and then use the next 30 to get into the Super Nintendo Entertainment System.
Fantastic. We will look forward to talking to y'all next week. Before you go, I do want to let you know we are all on YouTube. We are all YouTubers. We all have our own channels. Cool Dan, yours is?
Cool Dan 1211.
And ACMS.
I believe I mentioned it at the start of this episode.
ACMS Gaming. I am on there as Super Shay Tutorials doing martial arts weapons tricking. And then Shay Girl, who is not currently on the podcast,
Yes.
also has a channel, and she does a lot of comedy and fashion stuff. So make sure you check those out. You can also find us on Facebook under Super Shea Gaming. Matter of fact, you look up Super Shea Gaming, you'll probably find us. Or if you want to find all of us in the same spot, we have our own website. It is called twosheaproductions.com. That is the number 2, sheaproductions.com. Feel free to message us, email us, or we also have some really cool merch on that twosheaproductions.com site. Feel free to check that out. That is up and running now. Thank you all for being here with us. We appreciate each and every one of you, and we hope you all have a awesome week.
Final thoughts for me. Have a awesome day.
What?
ACMS.
Any final thoughts?
Meow.
Yeah, it was ACMS game.
Take care, everyone.